Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Game of Thrones further analysis of Season 7, Episode 1, Dragonstone. This video is a part of a series of videos where I give some further thoughts on the reaction to this episode or possible theories or predictions. So I'll have to start with a spoiler warning, not only for Game of Thrones up to Season 7, Episode 1, but more importantly for production leaks and a very detailed plot leak. So if you don't want to know anything about what's been confirmed for the rest of Season 7, then this video may not be for you. So let's start with Arya. It was interesting to hear her say she was heading to King's Landing to kill the Queen, because we know from the leaks that she does spend the bulk of the season in Winterfell. So the big question is, how does she end up there? Some have speculated that she isn't really heading to King's Landing and was just lying to the Lannister soldiers, but I don't think that's the case at all. I think Arya is sincere in her desire to go to King's Landing to finish her kill list, as we saw from where she first went when she returned to Westeros as an indication of that. So then the question becomes, what will divert her north? While the promo for next week's episode gives a little hint, as we see a direwolf who most certainly is Nymeria, and the plot leaks mention Arya would run into Nymeria, but I kind of doubt that simply seeing her direwolf would be enough to divert her north. It seems like she would need someone to tell her of the news that her family has retaken Winterfell and Jon and Sansa are in charge. I feel the combination of these things may be enough. Perhaps she hears the news first and considers it, but then seeing Nymeria reminds her of what it is to be a Stark, and so she changes her mind. I think that's where I'd put my guess anyway. So we see Arya kill all the Freys, and the Lannisters has sent soldiers to the Riverlands to keep the peace in the absence of power, but it wasn't mentioned what happened to the Tullys. And the season finale last year was mentioned that Edmure Tully was being held in the dungeons of the twins, so I was disappointed we didn't see Arya free him. Or perhaps will this line be disregarded and we'll learn that Jaime was true to his promise to Edmure and that he and his wife are now at Castle Rock. Either way, production leaks have stated that Edmure will be in Season 7, so I do wonder what role he and the Tullys will play, as it seems like they would be the natural option to replace the Freys as the leaders of the Riverlands, but perhaps the Lannisters are still strong enough to prevent that from happening. I dare say they won't be for long, but we'll see. So I did want to talk about the little cameo by Ed Sheeran, as that was the biggest buzz on the social media. Was all about after this episode aired. I didn't talk about this in my initial review because frankly I had no idea who he was. I heard there was some kind of celebrity musician in the scene, but I had no idea how popular he was. I heard many complaining about the scene, saying that seeing him took them out of the story and that his appearance was far too telegraphed and they focused too much on him, or that he was a horrible actor. And honestly, I strongly disagree with this, and the fact that I couldn't figure out which one of the Lannister soldiers this celebrity was until someone pointed it out to me tells me his appearance wasn't at all telegraphed. And honestly, I didn't see anything wrong with his acting. I think those who do know him or are familiar with him were simply distracted by that. But speaking as someone who had no idea who he was, I have to say there was nothing telegraphed about his appearance. I mean, I've seen other celebrity cameos in other shows where it was so blatantly obvious that it was a celebrity cameo. You didn't even need to know who the celebrity was to realize that this was a celebrity cameo, but this was obviously not the case here, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, moving on to the Hound scenes with Beric Dondarrion, I find it interesting that the Hound was asking him on what makes him so special and why the Lord of Light keeps bringing him back, and his response was he isn't special and he doesn't know why he's being brought back other than that he still has a purpose to serve. I do wonder if that purpose is to save Jon Snow or someone else's life before the end. We know Beric will be up in the north and the big battle that happens in episode 6. It's rumored that he'll die, but I personally didn't see any concrete spoilers about him dying. Thoros of Myr, yes, but not Beric. But if I had to guess, I would say he will die, but I think his death will be meaningful and somehow helpful against the fight against the White Walkers, which will explain why he was brought back to life these multiple times, and of course the implications of that being that Jon Snow's resurrection will also serve some greater purpose. So touching on Bran for a bit, I've seen a lot of videos that mention Bran's mark that the Night King gave him last season, the one that allowed the White Walkers to bypass the magic that was protecting the Three-Eyed Raven's little cave. So many speculate that Bran passing through the wall with this mark will allow the White Walkers to bypass the magic of the wall. But personally, I think that mark only applied to the Three-Eyed Raven's cave and not the wall itself. And perhaps the power of the mark has even faded, and I believe this, for several years. First of all, for several reasons. First of all, Benjen said that Bran was a Three-Eyed Raven now, so you think that he'd know enough to know if his passing through the wall would also allow the White Walkers to pass through the wall. And even if he didn't know, Benjen would, as he seemed pretty knowledgeable in the ways of the White Walkers. But more than that, if this actually does happen to be the case and the White Walkers are able to pass through the wall because of the massive, overwhelming incompetence of the very people who are pledged most to fight against them, then that would make them the biggest idiots in the entire damn story, and everyone would have been better off had Bran never went north in the first place. And if that is the case, then I consider his entire storyline a massive waste of time and a failure. So I want to be perfectly clear on this. If the White Walkers do pass through the wall because of Bran's mark, I would consider this the single worst thing that the show has ever done. Worse than the time that Yara ran away from some dogs. Worse than Arya having Wolverine-type regenerative powers. And yes, even worse than all the bullshit that they've done with Dorne. To me, this would be the single worst thing the show has ever done, which is why I am so very desperately hoping that this will not happen. But that's just my opinion. But I do have some hope, because I think this episode was quite clear in its foreshadowing that if the White Walkers were to pass through the wall, it would happen at Eastwatch by the Sea, not Castle Black. So, very likely Bran's mark will have nothing to do with it. The fact they're building Eastwatch to be in an important place by putting Tormund in charge and mentioning he's, that Eastwatch by the Sea is the closest location to Hardhome, and also, of course, the Hound's Vision in the Fire is setting Eastwatch by the Sea to be the important location. Of course, those of us who have read the plot leaks know that this is foreshadowing the big battle Jon and his merry band of followers will have with the White Walkers near Eastwatch by the Sea, so I think it's likely something to do with this battle will explain how the Walkers pass through the wall. Some have suggested that the White Walkers will simply go around the wall, but I say if they could just simply go around the wall, that would make the wall pretty fucking useless. And useless, I don't think it is. I mean, what are they going to do? Swim around the wall or go on boats? I don't really see either of that happening. Before, I was pretty adamant that the wall would not come down, but I've changed my mind on that due to some pretty heavy foreshadowing. In this episode, Archmaester at the Citadel mentions how the wall stood through it all, and if that's not foreshadowing that the wall will come down, I don't know what is. And this is coupled by the foreshadowing last season when Jon left Castle Black and told Ed that he has the wall and to make sure that it doesn't come down while he's gone. Yep, no doubt about it, that wall is coming down. Now, granted, I don't think that means the entire thing has to come down. It could just be a small portion of it that's by Eastwatch by the Sea, but either way, I do predict the last scene of season 7 will be that wall a crumbling down. And speaking of the Citadel, we see Jorah there already, and we do know he will be cured of his grayscale by episode 5. So I do think we will get more interactions between Sam and Jorah, and somehow Sam will deem Jorah very important, and he will be the one that gets the Archmaester to somehow cure Jorah's grayscale, but that's just my guess. So I also want to touch on this trailer that was released at Comic-Con yesterday. I heard some speculate on whether or not this was just for episode 2, but I don't think it was. But I think it was mainly episode 2 and 3, and perhaps a little bit from 4, but I don't think it's much beyond that, as we do get a clip of Euron parading through King's Landing to cheers, which would be him returning with his gift, which I believe will happen in episode 3. And we also see Randall Tarley in the throne room making his alliance with Cersei. I'm not sure which episode this will happen in, but I'm guessing it will be episode 2. And then episode 3, he and Jaime will go to Highgarden and take it, but that's just my guess. But speaking of Euron's gift to Cersei, I found it a bit amusing seeing people speculate on what this gift would be. Surprisingly, a majority of people I saw speculating guessed it would be Tyrion, which I find quite shocking that anyone really believes that Tyrion will be killed by Euron in Season 7 as a gesture to win Cersei over. No fucking way that would happen. I don't understand how anyone could even entertain this possibility. Only a few people I've seen had guessed the Sand Snakes, and those who have were dismissed by the other people present, but I do think that it's actually quite obvious. Although some have guessed Lady Olenna, and that's a good guess too, at least much better than Tyrion, but we do know it will be Arya and Tyene Sand as well as Yara that Euron will bring back to King's Landing as gifts to Cersei, and this does make sense as Arya was the one who killed Marcella, so I don't really expect her to live for very long. So in the trailer, we also see Melisandre arriving at Dragonstone and telling Daenerys about how important her role will be going forward, but also mentioning another who's very obviously Jon Snow. And we also see Jon mentioning the importance of Dragonfire against the White Walkers, while Royce objects that you can't trust a Targaryen. This combined with the very heavy foreshadowing of Dragonglass being at Dragonstone and Jon needing Dragonglass against the White Walkers is very obviously setting up for a Jon and Daenerys meeting. I did find it interesting that Jon said Dragonfire, though, and not Dragonglass. It does mean he's taking her claim she has dragons seriously and recognizing that there would be a powerful weapon against the White Walkers. This actually surprises me a bit because everyone else seems to be totally underestimating Daenerys' dragons, and I kind of thought that Jon would as well. Although we won't get a proper meeting with Jon and Daenerys until episode 3, so next week's episode will likely just set the stage for it, but I just cannot wait to see it. So that's it for my further analysis video on Dragonstone. Be sure to join me next week as I cover episode 2 of season 7, Stormborn, which I will be covering in a review shortly after the episode airs, and a live discussion video with Afghan Tomko and Josh and Anna from Geeksiders a few days after, and another further analysis video later on in the week. Also be sure to check out my channel for many more videos on other shows like Star Trek, Dark Matter, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.